The year is 2038. The room is quiet. Conditioned air hums. It smells like new carpet and endowed money. A young man stands in the main hall. His name is David Chen. He is a senior systems engineer, sent here from corporate headquarters in Moline, Illinois. He holds a tablet in his hands. The screen glows with charts and data points. He is looking at a summary report, the Jenkins method, a 5-year study across a network of 200 independent farms. He scrolls through the numbers again, then a third time. Input costs down an average of 41.7%. Nitrogen fertilizer use cut by half. Diesel fuel consumption reduced by a third. Soil carbon sequestration up 22%. And the yield. The yield was the number that made no sense. Corn yields up an average of 18 bushels per acre. Soybeans up 9 bushels per acre. He shakes his head slightly. The numbers defied their models. They broke the accepted logic of industrial agriculture. He looks up from the tablet. Across the hall, a large photograph hangs on the wall. A woman in her late 50s. Her face is weathered by sun and wind. Her eyes are clear. She stands next to a green tractor, an older model, but clean, immaculately maintained. Under the photo, a brass plaque. Sarah Jenkins, founder. David turns to the center's director, an older woman named Maria. He gestures with the tablet. Her methods, they're not in any of our manuals. They don't follow our best practices guides. Maria smiles a little, a knowing smile. She says, Sarah was never very good at following manuals, especially when they told her something was impossible. David looks back at the photo, at the woman who built this place, who rewrote the rules of farming for an entire region. He doesn't know that 20 years earlier, in the spring of 2018, this same woman stood in a different room, a much louder room, smelling of grease and stale coffee, and she was told she was finished. She was told her farm was done. She was told the machine she depended on for her very survival was impossible to fix. This is the kind of story we tell on this channel. The stories of people who were counted out, who were told no, who looked at an impossible problem and found a solution that wasn't in the manual. If you believe these stories need to be told, hit that subscribe button, because what happened next changed everything. Not just for one woman or one farm, but for thousands of people who came after her. Let's go back to March of 2018, the mud season. The time of year in the Midwest when the world is gray and brown, and hope is a seed you haven't planted yet. Sarah Jenkins was 29 years old. She had been running the family farm for 3 years, ever since her father passed. It wasn't a big farm, just 120 acres her grandfather had bought after the war. It was enough to get by on, barely. Most years, the profit was a rounding error. A few $1,000s left over after the bank and the suppliers were paid. But it was hers. The dirt was hers. The debt was hers. The worry was hers. And so was the tractor. A 2014 John Deere 8320R. Her father had bought it used 2 years before he died. It was the single most valuable thing she owned. It was more than a machine. It was her partner. It was her entire workforce. And one Tuesday morning, it wouldn't start. Not just a dead battery. The dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. A dozen error codes flashing in angry red letters. Limp mode. The machine was protecting itself by refusing to work. She called the regional dealership, the only one for 100 miles. A young mechanic in a clean green shirt came out. He plugged a laptop into a port under the steering column. He tapped on the keys for 20 minutes. He frowned. He told her the main engine wiring harness was shot. He pointed to a spot deep in the engine bay. See that? He shined a light on a thick bundle of wires wrapped in black tape. Rodents. They chewed through it over the winter. It's shorting out the whole CAN bus system. The tractor's brain is fried. Sarah felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. So what does that mean? He closed his laptop. It means you need a new harness. And it means you need to tow this thing to the shop. We can't do that job out here. 2 days later, she stood in the service manager's office, the office of Mr. Henderson. Frank Henderson. He was a good man. Everyone in the county knew Frank. Coached Little League for 20 years, served on the church board. His dealership sponsored the county fair's 4-H competition. He had known Sarah's father for decades. He had sold him that very tractor. He looked at the work order on his desk. He sighed. He took off his glasses and cleaned them with a soft cloth, a gesture of practiced sympathy. Sarah, this is a bad one. He slid the paper across the desk. She looked at the number at the bottom. $11,200. She felt the air leave her lungs. Her vision swam for a second. She gripped the arms of the chair. Frank, I can't. There's no way I can pay that. I don't have it. The bank won't extend my operating loan, not this year. Frank nodded slowly. He had seen this look 1,000 times, the look of a farmer pushed to the edge. I know, he said. His voice was soft, kind. The part itself is $4,200. It has to come from Moline. The rest is labor. It's a 25-hour job, minimum. My guys have to pull the cab off the frame to get to it. It's the most complex part of the whole machine. There are hundreds of wires in that loom. Tiny little data wires for all the sensors. It's not like the old days. You can't just splice a wire and wrap it in tape. Sarah thought about her uncle, Ray, her mother's brother. He could fix anything. What if we just repaired the damaged section? My uncle is a mechanic. He could help me. We could just splice the broken wires. Frank put his glasses back on. He leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. He looked her right in the eye. His gaze was earnest, full of genuine concern. Sarah, I cannot let you do that. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen people try. It never works. Not on these new machines. The computer systems are too sensitive. A bad splice, a little corrosion, the resistance is off by a fraction of an ohm, and the whole system goes down. You could fry a $15,000 engine control module. You could cause a fire. I am not going to be the man who lets Sarah Jenkins burn her tractor to the ground to save a few $1,000s. He believed it. Every word. He wasn't being cruel. He was protecting her. He was being responsible. He was being certain. The most dangerous limitation is the one imposed by someone who genuinely believes they are protecting you. Certainty delivered with kindness. It is more damaging than outright hostility because you cannot fight it with anger. It can only be disproven with decades of work. Sarah stared at the work order. The number felt like a judgment, a final verdict. She couldn't pay it, which meant she couldn't plant, which meant she would lose the farm. It was that simple, that brutal. Frank saw the despair in her face. Look, he said, let's talk to sales. Maybe we can work out a trade-in. Get you into a lease on a newer model, spread the cost out. She stood up. The chair scraped on the linoleum floor. No. Thank you, Mr. Henderson, but no. She walked out of the office, past the shiny new tractors on the showroom floor, each one costing more than her entire farm was worth. She got into her old pickup truck. and she drove. Not home. She drove to her uncle's place. Ray lived in a small house 10 miles out of town. A workshop bigger than the house stood next to it. He was 65 years old, retired. He had worked as a diesel mechanic his whole life, until the accident. A combine auger. It took his left arm just below the elbow. His left sleeve was always pinned up, a quiet, constant reminder. He didn't talk about it. He just adapted. He built jigs and clamps and tools he could operate with one hand. He never stopped fixing things. Sarah found him in the workshop. He was meticulously cleaning a carburetor, his one hand moving with a surgeon's precision. She sat on a stool. She told him everything: the rodents, the error codes, the dealership, the work order for $11,200. She told him what Frank Henderson had said about the CAN bus, the sensitive computers, the risk of fire, the impossibility of a repair. Ray listened. He didn't interrupt. He just kept cleaning the carburetor. When she was finished, the silence in the workshop was heavy. She waited. She expected him to agree, to tell her Frank was right, that the new machines were just too complicated. Instead, he set the carburetor down on a clean rag. He wiped his hand on his pants. He looked at her. His eyes were the same color as hers. He said 2 sentences. They paid us for the farm, but they left us the dirt. This was a family story. Their great-grandfather had lost his land in the 30s, foreclosed on. But he stayed. He worked as a tenant on the land he used to own. He told his son, "They took the paper, but they can't take the dirt from under my feet." It was the family mantra, the foundation of their belief. What you can hold in your hands, what you can work with your own skill, that is what is real. Then Ray said something else. He tapped a finger on the workbench. "It's just wires, Sarah." He said it so simply. It's just wires. Copper is copper. A computer is just a box with fancy switches. Let's go get your tractor. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, but by a friend. By someone who thought they were helping you. Someone who laid out all the logical, sensible reasons for you to give up. And you had to walk away from that conversation with their certainty ringing in your ears. And make a choice. Tell me about it in the comments, because this is where the story turns. This is the moment a quiet decision changes the next 20 years. They hauled the 8320R to Ray's shop on a flatbed trailer. It took up nearly the entire space, a giant, silent green monument to modern complexity. For 2 days, they did nothing but prepare. Ray downloaded the tractor's technical service manual, all 3,000 pages of it. He printed out the 150 pages of wiring diagrams. Sarah taped them to the workshop wall, a huge mosaic of lines and numbers and symbols. She highlighted the path of the main harness, from the engine control module, to the fuel injectors, to the dozens of sensors that monitored everything from oil pressure to exhaust temperature. Ray studied the diagrams. He drank coffee. He was silent for hours, tracing the paths with his finger, memorizing the color codes. He wasn't just looking at a map, he was understanding the language of the machine. He told Sarah, "Frank Henderson sees a sealed box. I see a conversation. These wires are just carrying messages." The rodent broke the conversation. We just need to teach them how to talk to each other again. On Saturday morning, they started. Ray had built a special rig, a series of clamps on an articulated arm, his second hand. He used it to hold the flashlight, to hold the wire strippers, to hold the soldering iron. Sarah became his other hand, and his eyes. She would call out the wire codes from the diagram on the wall. A 5-YG, that's circuit 5710, camshaft position sensor. Ray would find the yellow wire with the green stripe. He would feel it with his fingers. He was working in a space no bigger than a shoebox, deep inside the machine, one-handed. He would cut the damaged section. Just an inch of wire chewed by a mouse. An inch of wire that cost $11,200. Then, Sarah would hand him a new piece of copper wire, the exact same gauge. Ray would strip the ends. He'd slide a piece of heat shrink tubing over it. Then, with a surgeon's steadiness, he would splice them. Not with a cheap crimp connector. He soldered every single connection. He heated the wire, applied the solder. A perfect, clean silver joint, stronger than the original wire. He did this for 73 wires, one by one. The air filled with the smell of rosin and hot metal. It was slow, meticulous, reverent work. Each connection was a small act of defiance, a refusal to accept the manual's verdict. They started at 7 a.m. They finished at 2 p.m. 7 hours. Ray slid out from under the tractor. His face was smudged with grease. He was tired, but he was smiling. "That's it," he said. "Let's see if she talks." Sarah climbed into the cab. The key felt heavy in her hand. She took a deep breath. She turned the key. The dashboard lit up. It ran through its diagnostic check. One by one, the warning lights went out. Then the engine turned over. A deep, rumbling diesel roar. It was alive. It was talking. The screen was clear. No error codes, not a single one. Sarah put her head on the steering wheel, and for the first time in a week, she cried. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of a battle won. The total cost of the repair? $80. For a roll of solder, a spool of wire, and a pack of heat shrink tubing. $80. And a Saturday. She had saved $11,120, but it was more than money. She had taken back control. She had refused to be a victim of a system designed to make her helpless. She had learned the most important lesson of her life. The box is never sealed, not if you have the courage to open it. That spring, planting season was different. The community had heard the story. It traveled fast, the way stories do in small towns. At the grain co-op, at the feed store, at church. The community split. There were the doubters, older farmers mostly, men who had farmed the same way for 40 years. They'd shake their heads. "That was a foolish risk," one said. "She got lucky. That splice won't last. Wait till moisture gets in there. She'll be sorry next year." It was the voice of conventional wisdom, the voice of fear, the same voice Frank Henderson had used, full of certainty. Then there were the supporters, younger farmers mostly, people who were also struggling with debt, who felt trapped by the high cost of modern equipment. They'd stop Sarah in the street. They'd ask her questions. "How did you do it? Could your uncle look at my planter? The dealership wants $6,000 to fix my GPS." She became a symbol, a quiet hero of the right to repair. She didn't ask for it. She just wanted to farm. But she had proven something. She had shown them the box wasn't sealed, and that gave them hope. That extra $11,120 changed her farm. It was more than her entire profit from the year before. She didn't buy a new truck. She didn't take a vacation. She invested it back into the dirt. She bought a soil testing kit, a good one. She spent her evenings at the kitchen table, reading about soil science, about microbiology, about regenerative agriculture. She learned that her soil was dying, compacted by years of heavy tillage, stripped of nutrients by monoculture crops. She was spending thousands of dollars on fertilizer just to get a mediocre yield. She decided to run an experiment. She divided her biggest field in half. On one half, she farmed the way her father had, the conventional way. On the other half, she tried something new, no-till planting. And after the harvest, she planted a cover crop, a mix of clover, rye, and radishes. Not to sell, but to feed the soil, to protect it over the winter. The doubters laughed. "She's planting weeds," they said, "wasting money on seed she can't even sell." Let me tell you about the next few years, because this is where the story becomes bigger than one woman and one tractor. The first year, the yields were the same on both fields, but on the experimental plot, she had spent $3,000 less on fuel and fertilizer. She had made more by spending less. Contrast math, the simplest kind of proof. The second year, the cover crop plot yielded 5 bushels more per acre. The soil was darker. It held water better. The third year, it was 10 bushels more. The numbers on her ledger started to change. The line for profit started to grow. For the first time, she had breathing room. Let's mark the time. Let the numbers tell the story. 2020. She converted her entire 120 acres to the new method. Her profit that year was $25,000, cash. 2022. She paid off her operating loan at the bank. For the first time in 2 generations, the farm was free of debt, cash. 2024. The neighboring 80-acre farm came up for sale. An old farmer was retiring. His kids didn't want the land. The bank offered her a mortgage. She said no. She walked into the real estate office with a cashier's check. She bought it. Cash. 2026. She bought a second tractor, a used Case IH. She paid for it with money she had earned. Cash. All this time, the 8320R kept running. Every spring, Ray would come over. He and Sarah would inspect the spliced harness. It was perfect, clean, dry, strong, a quiet monument to their victory. All this time, Mr. Henderson watched. He saw her F250 drive past the dealership, always going somewhere else for parts now. He heard the talk at the co-op, about her yields, about her buying the Miller place, about how she was debt-free. He saw other farmers starting to copy her, planting cover crops, reducing their tillage, asking questions. His service bay was a little less busy every year. The high-margin repair jobs were drying up. He was still a good man. He still coached Little League. But he felt something he couldn't quite name, a hollow feeling in his gut. The feeling of being on the wrong side of the future, the quiet witness. Watching from a distance as the person you dismissed becomes the person everyone else looks up to. There is a unique kind of justice in that. A quiet, slow, devastating justice. The reckoning came in 2030, 12 years after that Saturday morning in the workshop. The agricultural economy was in a downturn. Commodity prices were low. Input costs were high. Farmers were getting squeezed hard. The dealership was struggling. Frank Henderson was 68 years old, thinking about retirement. But he couldn't afford to. The business his father had started was slowly failing. One afternoon he picked up the phone. He dialed a number he hadn't called in over a decade. Sarah Jenkins answered. He asked if he could come out to her farm. He said he wanted to ask her advice. She said yes. He drove his pristine Chevy Silverado down the gravel lane to her house. The farm looked different. The fields weren't bare, plowed dirt. They were green with cover crops. The equipment in the machine shed was a mix of brands. Green, red, blue, whatever worked best, whatever she could maintain herself. She met him at the door of her office. It was a new building, next to the house, clean and bright. He saw the 8320R parked outside. It looked almost new. He knew it had over 10,000 hours on it. He followed her inside. She poured him a cup of coffee. They sat at a large table made of reclaimed barn wood. He talked about the dealership, about the struggles, about how farmers couldn't afford the new equipment anymore, or the repairs. He wanted to start a series of workshops to teach farmers basic maintenance and repair. A right to repair initiative. He wanted to partner with her. He wanted her to be the face of it. The irony was so thick he could taste it with his coffee. Sarah listened. She didn't smile. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just listened. While he was talking, his eyes wandered around the office, and then he saw it. On the wall behind her desk, mounted on a beautiful piece of dark walnut, was a 1-foot section of a wiring harness. Dozens of wires, each one with a perfect silver soldered joint. A piece of industrial art, a trophy. He stopped talking. He just stared at it. He recognized the thick black loom, the specific mix of wire colors. He knew exactly what he was looking at. He looked from the harness on the wall to Sarah's face. The silence stretched on. Finally, he spoke. His voice was quiet, humbled. "I was wrong." He said it to the floor. "I was so sure I was right. I thought I was helping you, protecting you." Sarah took a sip of her coffee. She chose her words carefully. "You weren't wrong, Mr. Henderson. You were certain." She let the word hang in the air. And that's harder to forgive. Because when you're wrong, you can learn something. When you're certain, you can't. "You told me it was impossible, and if I had believed you, I would have lost this farm. My Uncle Ray, he never dealt in certainty. He only dealt in what was possible." He looked at her, and for the first time he understood. The damage he had almost caused wasn't financial. It was a theft of possibility, a foreclosure on a person's belief in themselves. He nodded slowly. He stood up. "Thank you for your time, Sarah." She walked him to the door. As he was about to leave, she said one more thing. "I'll do the workshops, but on one condition. My Uncle Ray teaches the class on electrical systems, and you have to be in the front row of every class." Frank Henderson met her gaze. He saw no malice in her eyes, only a quiet strength. He nodded. "Deal," he said. It was the beginning of a new chapter, for both of them. But that's not the end of the story. Because a legacy is not what you build for yourself, it's what you build for others. The repair workshops were a huge success. They started a movement in the region. Farmers helping farmers, sharing knowledge, breaking their dependence on a system that profited from their helplessness. Sarah became a mentor. She started a cooperative with 5 other local farms, the Jenkins Method Co-op. They shared equipment, they shared data, they bought supplies in bulk. They created their own local economy, insulated from the whims of the global market. By 2035, the co-op had grown to 50 farms, covering over 20,000 acres, all of them profitable, all of them building healthy soil. In 2036, Sarah used the profits from the co-op and her own savings to establish a foundation, the Jenkins Family Agricultural Innovation Center, the building David Chen would stand in 2 years later. It wasn't a university research center. It was a trade school, a place for hands-on learning. It offered scholarships, not just for agricultural science degrees, but for diesel mechanics programs, for welding certifications, for machinist training. She named the most prestigious scholarship the Uncle Ray Grant. It was reserved for aspiring mechanics with physical disabilities, providing funding for adaptive tools and workshop modifications. Her legacy wasn't in the dirt, it was in the people. It was in the renewed dignity of working with your hands, the profound freedom of self-sufficiency. She never gave speeches, she never wrote a book. She just kept working, proving people wrong, not with words, but with results, with healthy soil, with profitable farms, with young people who knew how to fix their own machines. Today, if you visit that center, you can see the photograph of Sarah on the wall. But the most important exhibit is in a simple glass case in the main hall. It's not a shiny plaque or a trophy. It's a small, custom-built workbench. On it, sits a soldering iron, a pair of wire strippers, and a series of articulated clamps, a one-handed soldering rig, built by a man who refused to be limited by what he had lost. Next to it is a small plaque. It doesn't say much. Uncle Ray's Tools, circa 2018. Sometimes, a young student will stand there, looking at the simple tools behind the glass, and they will feel a connection, a spark of understanding. They understand that the most powerful force in the world is not money, or technology, or power. It's the quiet, stubborn refusal to believe someone else's definition of what is possible. It's the simple, profound truth that saved a farm and changed a community. Copper is copper. It's just wires. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is sitting in an office just like Sarah did. They are being told no. They are being given a long list of sensible, logical reasons why their idea is impossible, why their dream is impractical, why they should just give up and accept the manual. The person telling them this might even be kind. They might genuinely believe they are helping. They are protecting them from failure. But what they are really doing is enforcing a limit. They are closing a door. They are sealing the box. This story is for that person, the one who has to walk out of that room and make a choice. The world is full of people who will tell you what you cannot do. They are loud, they are numerous, and they are certain. Your job is not to argue with them. Your job is not to convince them. Your job is to go home. Find your own workshop and quietly, meticulously, prove them wrong. If this story means something to you, if you've ever been that person, or if you know that person, share this video, because someone out there needs to hear that the box is never truly sealed. And sometimes, the most revolutionary act is just picking up a tool and getting to work. Thanks for watching.